Well, hello everybody. I'm John Feldt, and this is the weekly water outlook for the Midwest for October 13th, 2013. Well, for most of the Midwest, we're going to start off the week with high pressure pushing in. This is a surface map. This cold front went through, so conditions have cooled off. It's been very dry as far as humidities go, and this high pressure will start out the week. But for most of the Midwest, it's going to change as we go through the week. Some areas will be drying out, such as the eastern part of the U.S. as the front goes through, and other areas will have an increasing chance of rainfall. Now, over the area of the southern U.S., look at this area in green. That's some moisture that's interacting with this front. It'll be heavy rain in that area, but for the most part, the heaviest rain will stay to our south. And the reason for that, we have Pacific moisture streaming into the south, and that Pacific moisture is producing some mid and upper level heavier amounts of precipitation. When you get the mid-level moisture, not just the low-level moisture, but mid-level moisture, you tend to have the possibility of heavier rain. That's more educational than informative because it's really not going to be making up to our area this week. Now, if we look at the last 7 days, observed rainfall over the Midwest. Areas in blue are generally very light amounts of precipitation, so it was a quiet week across the Midwest. There was some more significant rain over the far eastern part of the Midwest, including parts of Ohio and Kentucky. Some pockets there in yellow you can see of 2 inches of rain. And then over the upper Midwest, parts of western parts of North and South Dakota, you can see that there was also some heavier precipitation. Elsewhere, very quiet conditions. Wisconsin, only light amounts of rain. In many areas, less than 1/10 of an inch of rain. Some spots no rain at all. Likewise for much of Iowa and Illinois. So if we look at the percent of normal, looking back, you can see very clearly that the heaviest rain was confined to the western parts of the Dakotas. That's that area in blue and purple. This is a percent of normal for the last 7 days, and you can see there 4 to 6 times normal for the week. Also above normal precipitation in Ohio, but the core of the Midwest, look at that large area of red, so a dry week with below normal rainfall over most of the area. Now, if we look at the current steering winds, this time of year, what I'm looking at is wind energy aloft. And when you have this wind energy, that represents atmospheric energy, and that'll produce your rainfall. Sometimes in fall, we don't get a real active upper type pattern, so it can be quiet. Harvest time is oftentimes quiet. So I'm looking at the upper atmospheric energy in this area of yellow shaded in here. That's a core of strong winds, and I'll be digging into the southwest U.S., and that's something I'm going to be looking at. So if we look at early this week, this is a jet stream pattern in blue. This is the area of energy. It rotates out of the southwest U.S., and one core of energy breaks off and heads up towards the northeast. Another core goes into Texas. So one that's heading up into the northeast is that I'm going to be watching for the potential for enhanced rainfall. I wanted to take one more look at the jet stream, looking out into the latter part of October because we're going to have a significant trend change. I wanted to show you here these dashed blue lines. The solid blue lines of jet stream, the dashed blue lines, when we have dashed blue lines, those are negative anomalies, and that is indicating that upper jet stream will be lower than usual, and that jet stream will be digging to the south, and that means cool and generally dry will be a significant pattern after this week once we get into that week 2 period. So we look at the rainfall this week. I did want to point out that there is a chance of more significant rainfall. Parts of eastern South Dakota up into Minnesota. That's with that jet energy pushing off, breaking off, and pushing up through that area. But really down to the south and to the east of that, right through this area right here, that's going to be missing that energy, and it looks like a very quiet week in that region. So really, with the exception of this one little band here of modest precipitation, it looks like a pretty quiet week with many areas receiving light amounts of rain, if any rain at all. Now, I wanted to look out a little bit further here. This is a long-range model, accumulated precipitation through October 23rd. And again, point out, I'm going to sort of draw it in here, very large core of the Midwest. mainly the central and eastern Midwest, with very little rain. So it looks like a quiet period right through most of the end of the month. Now this initial rain here, this is from this week, and once that goes through, it looks pretty quiet as well. So I think with the exception of that little pocket of energy moving through this week, large part, if not the entire Midwest, looks like it's going to be going into a relatively quiet period and relatively dry period. So here's the area, the chance of heavy rain as far as a threats assessment early this week. And there could be some flooding with that as well in a few areas. But then as we get into the 20th through 26th of October, I did want to point out, as that jet stream dips down to the south, that will be allowing cold air to push down to the south. So it looks like a strong probability of below normal temperatures centered over Wisconsin, but surrounding states as well. And then generally speaking, below normal precipitation. Now an exception to that could be in this area in green with the upper low, and that could have some showery type precipitation. Most likely not heavy, but there could be some over the eastern parts of the Midwest. So the takeaway points from today's briefing: small part of the upper Midwest will be wet early this week, dry over eastern sections, and generally it looks like we're working into a cool and mostly dry period that'll extend from the middle part into the latter part of the month. Appreciate you listening to this week's briefing. I'm working on my update for winter and a lot more information, so stay tuned throughout the week and throughout the rest of the month. Thank you for listening. I'll be talking with you again next week.